Well, now let's talk Houston Texans. All eyes were on the Houston Texans as they had the #2 overall pick in this year's draft. And right now, we are joined by Locked On Texans expert John Hickman to break down everything Houston Texans. Hey, John, how you doing tonight?
Doing great, ready to discuss the Houston Texans and the great draft that they had over the weekend.
Okay, so let's talk about it. The Houston Texans came into this draft in the first round, had the #2 pick and the #12 overall pick. So they picked C.J. Stroud, the #1 pick. With everyone know they needed a quarterback, but then traded up with Arizona to get the #3 overall pick and got Will Anderson Jr. Just talk to me about what it took to make that trade possible, and if you think locking down that second pick and that third pick was just a great idea for the Houston Texans.
It was absolutely a great idea for the Houston Texans as they fought towards, I think it was a minute left on the draft clock before that trade was finalized. I think that when you had an opportunity to get C.J. Stroud, a quarterback that you need for this franchise to move forward, the next idea was for DeMeco Ryans to get his guy. And that was obviously former Bama captain at Bama, Will Anderson, the edge rusher. This was a player that DeMeco had his eyes set on from day one. And between DeMeco Ryans, Nick Caserio, and the ownership, they found the best way to get the two guys in this franchise, in this building, to start the rebuilding process and moving forward to possibly put some butts in those seats and win some games.
Absolutely. I mean, we talk about the Texans pick, and their first 5 picks were all team captains. First 5 picks. So DeMeco Ryans, just from that standpoint, you could tell he's coming in trying to change the culture. But of all of the draft picks from the Texans, they got something at quarterback, a few at wide receiver, or center, defensive end, edge rusher. What was your favorite pick outside of those 2 first rounders from the Texans?
My favorite pick for the Houston Texans outside of those 2 first rounders had to be wide receiver Tank Dell. He doesn't necessarily have to start day one offensively, but for a team that doesn't have a lot of explosiveness on special teams, and for a team that eventually, you look at this wide receiver depth chart, isn't necessarily spectacular, who's to say Tank Dell isn't a day one starter with his skill set, the way he's able to run routes and get open, the quick release off the line of scrimmage, and his productivity in the open field.
First, before I ask about the future of the organization, a lot of people are saying it's between the Eagles and the Texans who won this year's draft. Which one are you picking?
I got to say the Eagles right now, and I'm saying the Eagles because they just got already a great team, and they got better adding all of those Georgia Bulldogs. And then do we include DeAndre Swift? It was a draft trade who
I guess you
brought
can.
over to Philly, and they were already in the Super Bowl last year. But if you're looking at a team that came into the draft needing to address every need at different positions and coming out of the draft and doing that, by far, it is the Houston Texans. Houston crushed it in this year's draft. And I got a little nugget for you. I think that when you look at this entire AFC South division, I would not be surprised if by the end of the year, Houston is competing to win this division.
Okay, I mean, that's a pretty big prediction, especially coming off of, this last season where, Lovie Smith gave away the first pick. But, John Hickman, I mean, it's always a pleasure having you on with this Texans Insight. We appreciate you, and we'll definitely be following along and talking to you soon as we get closer to the season beginning. Thanks, John.